Just over 4 years ago, I left my 14-year Fortune 30 career. There was a lot about it I enjoyed, and it did a lot for my personal development, but for years, I yearned for something more. I felt unhappy constantly. I looked for other jobs several times throughout that career, and every time I got in that process, I ended up staying because I would get promoted, they would offer me more money. I had some golden handcuffs. Well, eventually that all came to a head for me, and I needed something different, and so I left. And I'm going to give you the exact 5 things that I did leading up to me leaving that ultimately paved the way for where I am now and to start a career in entrepreneurship. Before I go on, I want to be very clear about who this episode is for and who it's not for. If you're at your job and you're unhappy because you think your boss is mean and you don't think that you get paid enough and you think that you've been promoted by now, or you think that you should have been promoted by now, you think you should work 4 days instead of 5, this episode is not for you. And if you think like that, I think you're going to find out very quickly that entrepreneurship is not for you if for some reason you were to try it. But if you are unhappy because you feel and you know that you want something more, you feel like you don't fit in with the people you're around at work, they talk about status, just things that you might not be as interested in, and you haven't done anything yet because you're not sure if you should, you're fearful of failing. What if you try something new and completely flop? You ask yourself, well, why would I give up this well-paying job for something with much less certainty? I'm making good money. Isn't that enough? Am I selfish for wanting something more? If that sounds like you, then this episode is for you, and I think you'll get some value. Who am I? My name is Ryan Rice. I'm a full-time real estate investor, and last year my company did about 50 deals. We made just under $1.2 million. And I'm sharing as much as I can to document my own journey as well as help you with yours if that is something that you're looking for. So the very first thing I did, and this is step 1, is you have to get clear on what it is that you want. And I'm going to explain to you how I did this. And I think the way that I did this is repeatable. And I've kind of developed this into a framework that I think would be easily repeated by you if this is something that you wanted to do. And I think you can do this in one of 2 ways. The first way to get clear on what you want is to hire a coach to help you. Now, if you are capitalized, then that could be a good option for you. And when I say hire a coach, I hired a Tony Robbins coach. If you go and you Google Tony Robbins coach and you reach out to them, that is a resource that can be very beneficial, but you're going to find out very quickly when you speak to them that it is not cheap. And so I think that is a good option if you are well capitalized and you just need and are looking for some direction. That is exactly what I did. I still talk to my Tony Robbins coach today, and we're 4.5 years, 5 years later than when I first started talking to her. But she is incredible, and that is one option if you want some outside help to get clear on what it is that you want. I think the other way that you can get clearer on what it is that you want if you don't want to do that or you are not well capitalized is to do these following things. What you're going to want to do first is define the categories of your life that are really important to you. And you're going to try and bucket these and simplify these as much as you possibly can. And what I'm going to do is give you the categories of my life that I've defined as important, and that might be a good starter for you. You could also do something like Google the quote wheel of life. That's something else that you could use as a tool. How you get there isn't really important. What's most important is that you take action to get clear it is on what you want. And in order to do that, you're going to have to define all of the categories of life that are important to you. And so for me, what does that look like? Category 1, and these are in no specific order, right? These are just kind of how I have them, but they're not necessarily in order of my priority. And so develop them however you want. But my first category is my physical and my mental health. I know that if I'm not physically healthy, then nothing else matters. And so it's something that I want to prioritize. And I know that the stronger my mind is, the stronger I'm going to be able to perform and move closer to my goals. And so that's category 1 for me. Category 2 are my relationships. Now, I personally have this broken down into subsections. I know the most important relationship in my life is my relationship with my wife, and the second most relationship in my life right now is my relationship with my kids. And I have those two in order of priority, kind of subcategorized in my relationships category. And then I do have a third subcategory of my relationships with everyone else that I'm close with, whether that's close friends or close family. Again, I'm not saying that that's how you should do it, but I think what would be helpful for you is to define what relationships are most important to you and establish that as a category of your life that's important that you can focus on. My third category is my financial/career life. That's pretty self-explanatory for me. What do I want financially out of my life? And from a career standpoint, in what way am I going to choose to get that? And then lastly, for me, the fourth category is passion. What am I naturally passionate about and what jazzes me up? And so, again, I'm not saying that these are the only four categories that should be important to you. This is just what works for me. And for me personally, I like to bucket things down as simply and in as few as possible, because that helps me get clarity on where it is that I want to go. And if I can do less things, then that's better for me than trying to do more. And look, I will say this kind of anecdotally, and for many of you, I may not have to say this, but if you truly want something more out of your life, and this episode is more tactical for you, you're actually looking for ways, then you could consider listening to the whole thing, but be sure you come back and pause it in the right moments and actually do these things, right? Take time to actually do these activities, come up with the categories that are important to you, because you could listen all you want and it sounds great. I do this all the time. I hear something on a podcast and I'm like, wow, that sounds amazing. But if I don't actually do anything with it, then nothing changes. And so, I guess just think about, do you just want to listen and feel good, or do you actually want to change something? And if you actually want to change something, then be sure to, if you're not going to listen to this on the first time through and actually pause and write stuff down, then come back and do that another time. Now that you've defined which categories are most important to you in your life, what you're going to do is you're going to take each category. And so, for example, if I were to do this all over again, I'm going to start with physical and mental health. And you're going to write down everything that you've ever wanted in those categories of your life. And when I say everything, spare nothing, right? And so whether you're doing that in a notes app on your phone, on your laptop, on an iPad, or with pen and paper, literally just write the category that you chose, and under it, write everything that you ever wanted to accomplish within that category of your life. And just make a list. It can be as long or as short or as descriptive or as vague as you want, but write down everything. And I'd encourage you to give yourself time to do this. Give yourself at least 15 to 30 minutes to sit there and brainstorm. What do I want most with my physical and my mental health? What do I want most out of my relationships, specifically out of my relationship with my wife? And write all of those things down. I'd encourage you not to put pressure on yourself. Just write freely, write whatever comes to mind. And you're going to do that for each category of your life that you defined as important to you. And so once you've done that, and you're going to have probably at least a few pages of notes in all of the things that you've ever wanted in those categories of your life, then what you're going to do next, and you're going to do this for each category, but start with the first one, is you're going to look at everything that you wrote and combine all of the things that you wrote into some sort of outcome statement, right? And so if you wrote, 10 to 15 different things, well, what is an outcome statement that if you achieved that outcome, those 10 to 15 things would also get achieved? And so you're looking for something that fully encompasses what you wrote in each section. And this is an outcome that if you achieved this outcome statement, then everything that you wrote would get accomplished. And I think what you'll find, how will you know if the outcome statement that you wrote is good, what you'll find is that outcome statement is going to have emotion. It's going to include why you want all of those things that you wrote that you've always wanted out of your life. And it's going to invoke, every time you read this outcome statement, it's going to evoke this sense of like, man, yeah, that's it. That's really what it is that I want. And this outcome statement can be, one statement. It can be 2 to 3, 4 sentences. It can be whatever you want. But for me, what's personally been helpful is the simpler it can be, the better. But think about what is an outcome that, should you achieve it, everything on that list gets accomplished. And I want to give you an example, and I'll pull this directly from an outcome that I have with my relationship with my wife, just so you can kind of see what I'm going for. As you can imagine, if I sat back and I thought about and I wrote all of the things that I wanted out of my relationship with my spouse, that list might be very long and there might be a lot of stuff on there. But this is an outcome that I felt fully encompassed everything that I want in my relationship with my wife. Achieve and continue a connected, beautiful, growing, giving, and loving relationship with my wife so that smiles, laughter, love, and growth dominate our time together. And what's powerful for me about that is every time I read that and every time I ask myself, well, what is something that I can do that is going to move me closer to that? Then that gives me the clarity that I need in the direction that I need to move in. And so I wanted to share that, be a little vulnerable and share my specific outcome statement, because that is the type of outcome statement that you're looking for. Something that evokes emotion and something that clearly encompasses everything that you've written. And look, this might take time. And I think what's important is not to put pressure on yourself to be perfect. That outcome statement that I just read to you is a rendition that's like 10th and 11th in terms of like I've written that outcome maybe 10 or 11 times, and that's kind of where I've landed. And I'm sure it will likely even continue to evolve. But do this for each one of your categories. And what you're looking for in the end is, you have these 4 to 5 categories of your life that you've defined as important. And you have these just solid emotion invoking outcome statements that no matter what's going on, you can kind of pick your head up out of a pile of shit. You can read the outcome statement. You can be like, yeah, that's what it is that I'm after. And when you have these outcome statements, the second thing that you're going to do is you're going to write them down somewhere where you see them often. And for me, this is just like a Google Doc that I review every couple weeks, or at least in the beginning, I was constantly reviewing it. For you, put it somewhere where you're going to see often. In the beginning, I think I have like a cork board in my office. I think I put them up at the cork board. Now, I had help in the beginning. The benefit of me having a Tony Robbins coach is I had someone that helped me be accountable to those outcome statements. If you don't have an outside person that is helping you be accountable to those outcome statements, then you're going to have to be accountable yourself. And so put them somewhere that you are going to see frequently. Or you could also consider bringing in, whether it's a spouse, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, someone that is close to you who can be an accountability partner for you and is constantly reminding you that those are the outcome statements that you have defined for yourself. The third thing that you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself a simple question for each outcome. So you're going to start at the top. Again, to use as an example, let's say you were starting at physical and your mental health, and you're going to ask yourself one question. What is the one thing I can do this week that is going to move me closer to that outcome statement? And then you're just going to write down one thing, right? And you're going to do that for each of the outcome statements that you have. And once that activity is done, you're going to have a small list of things to do, right? You're going to have a list of maybe 4 to 6 things, depending on how many categories you have or subcategories. But you're going to have a small list of like 4 to 6 things that you can do. And once you have that list, the fourth thing you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself, okay, you're going to start at the top of that list and you're going to say, how long would this take me? and you're going to give it a time frame, right? So whatever the answer to that question was, hey, what's the one thing I can do this week? You're going to define how long that thing is going to take you. And then, so let's say that, the first thing on your list, you decide it's going to take you an hour. Well, then you're going to pull up your calendar. And if you don't keep a calendar, you're going to start now. But you're going to pull up your calendar, whether that's electronically or whether that's something written, and you're going to plug that thing into your calendar. So if it takes an hour, you're going to figure out, okay, when is a time on my calendar that I can actually do this, given my current priorities? And you're actually going to put it into your calendar. And that's how you're going to stay accountable to actually doing it. And so what this is going to look like after the first time that you're doing this is you're going to pull up your calendar, and for the week, you're going to have those 4 to 6 activities. They're going to be plugged into your calendar, and that's how you're going to be accountable to doing them. Now, don't beat yourself up if you don't do every single one, but the point is you're asking yourself, how long is it going to take, and you're actually blocking the appropriate time so that you take that action. And what's really cool when you do this is when you've taken time to define very clearly what it is that you want, and then you ask yourself, hey, what's one thing that can move me closer to that outcome? And then you plug it into your calendar. For me, at least, I kind of had something to look forward to because I knew, this end outcome that I was after. And it was just this one little thing that I could do to get me closer. And it was like a little dopamine rush for me. I could knock something off on a checklist that would get me closer to where I go. And what was helpful for me, the difference between that and what I was normally doing is I was very good at execution, but maybe the execution that I was doing before wasn't towards the outcome that I really, really wanted. It might have been someone else's outcome or what I thought that I wanted, etc. But taking the time to get very clear on everything that I wanted to do was very helpful for me. And then I would define those actions and consistently take them. And then the fifth thing that you're going to do is you're going to repeat this activity every single week. Now, again, this is the benefit of having a Tony Robbins coach, because if you have a coach, then he or she can run through this with you every other week or whatever time frame that you choose is appropriate for you. And so again, I don't really care. Like, I have no affiliation with Tony Robbins, but having somebody that can just be an accountability partner for you to consistently go through this with, sometimes that was very helpful for me because life happens, you get busy. I had kids at the time. There was always things to do, but I knew every other week that I had this person that I had to call at this time, and I wanted to make sure that I showed up my best, and that was helpful for me. And so I would just strongly urge you to consider that if you are capitalized and you have the financial capability to hire a coach, then this is where it can come in handy for you. If you don't, then be your own accountability partner and simply do this activity once a week. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, the title of this episode is Do These 5 Things If You're Unhappy as an Employee, which is implying that, hey, do these 5 things and it's going to help you, start your own business. Well, for me, this is where I was in my journey. I knew that I wanted more. I loved the idea of starting a business, but I needed to get crystal clear on what it was that I wanted first. And because I wasn't crystal clear, no matter what violent action I took, it was like I could take violent action, but it wasn't in the direction that I knew was going to lead me to where it was that I wanted to go. And so I share these 5 things because if you have not done this yet, then no matter what it is that you do, you don't know where it is that you're going. You don't know if what you're doing is getting you closer to a destination because you haven't yet chosen a destination. And for me, what was most important is just choosing one. Now, I want to comment on, obviously, if the end goal here is that you're starting your own business, I want to comment on some strategy things that really helped me and that I would encourage you to think about, given that I've done this before. When I left my job, I had 3+ years of living expenses saved up. Now, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's egregious. I could never get to that. And I'm not saying that you have to or that's what you should do, but that's just what worked well for me is I had a whole lot of money sitting on the sidelines that in the worst case scenario, if something went wrong, I could fall back on. Now, the other option is you could start to build this business on the side. And that means you're going to work more. And I think you should accept that fact. And if you want to own your own business, that's probably a fact worth accepting. But a strategy that I would encourage is to replace your current income consistently for a good 3 to 6 months before leaving. And so ramp up your business. And when do you do this? You're going to do this from the 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. or from the 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. or from the 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. time slots, right? And so understanding that you're going to have to sacrifice that early morning or that late night time to build your business on the side while you're currently employed is something that's important to accept. And again, the other alternative is if you want to save up 3 years of expenses and do it that way, that's fine. But that's just another option, is to start this business on the side, do it for 3 to 6 months consistently, and have it match your current income for 3 to 6 months before you leave. And something that was very helpful for me when I did this is I would encourage you strongly to think about minimizing your expenses as much as possible. And this might be really difficult because there may be things that you're currently doing that you know that you should consider cutting. But if you did so, it might mean a reduction in social status. And you're going to have to accept that what's more important, your social status and looking cool in front of your friends, or you getting closer to your goals. And that is a saying, something that I've always said to myself, a question that I always ask myself that has helped me tremendously. Does this thing get me closer to my goals or does it not? And if it doesn't, then it's been a lot easier for me to make the decision to cut it. And that's also made it a lot easier to deal with me giving up some sort of social status. Because at the end of the day, I know I don't really give a shit about the social status. What I care most about is, am I getting closer to my goals? Now, the other thing you might be asking is like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? How do I build the skill sets required to start a business? Well, all of you are all probably at different stages in thinking about, like, I'm sure in your current jobs, you've achieved some sort of skill set. And depending on what skills those are, they might help you as an entrepreneur more, or they might help you a little bit less. But what I would, to kind of simplify things, if I were you, and depending on where you are in your skill set of being an entrepreneur, one of the easiest ways, in my opinion, to build business-specific skill sets is just study Alex Hormozi. Look, there's a lot of people that you could go study. Frankly, I don't care which one that you do, but that is the only human I can think of that has dedicated his entire life to making business education accessible for everyone. That's literally what he does. And so if you want to start a business, it would seem to make sense to me to align and study someone whose whole desired outcome is to make business education accessible to everyone. He's written a couple books, and coincidentally, if you are looking to start a business, his first couple books are, the first one talks about how to choose what to sell and how to build an offer that can actually, convert. And then his second book teaches you how to get leads, right? And if you have those two things, and then you learn how to get people to give you money for your thing, then voila, you have a business. He's got courses for that stuff on his website, so just search him. And, if the thing that's holding you back is not having the business specific knowledge, well, there you have it. There's somebody that if you just go spend consistent time with, then you can't use that as an excuse anymore. I want to end this with a couple mindset things that really helped me. Some of these things I learned in my journey, and some of them I thought about beforehand. But something that's really important for you to realize, and this I think is what prevents a lot of people from starting, is just realizing that whatever you choose to start is very likely not to be what you do forever. And so don't feel like you have to go choose this thing. What for me was really, really scary was, oh my gosh, I have to make sure that what I choose is the perfect thing. And, it's going to be what I'm running my business. And to be honest, none of that matters, because what matters most is just that you're acquiring the business skill sets that you need. What you choose to do first likely has very little relevance into who you are going to become over the next 10 years. And so what's most important is that just you pick something and you realize that the game is going to be learning the set of business skills that you need to succeed in business. not necessarily the specific business opportunity that you choose. Now, I think you can certainly brainstorm some good strategic decisions. In other words, maybe you don't want to choose to start a newspaper because that business is continuously declining. And so thinking about what are businesses or what are industries that the market is growing naturally. And if you did nothing, if the market grows naturally, that means your business is growing. That might be a good thing to consider. And so you could think about those things when you're thinking about starting. But what's most important, honestly, is just that you pick something and that you start and you realize that whatever you start is not going to be your forever thing anyways. And so it doesn't matter. And what was funny for me when I was still in my previous job and I first started talking to my coach, I was like, man, you know what? I want to be a coach. And so I paid this website designer like $3,000 and developed a really beautiful website. And I got it all up and running. And it just kind of sat there because as time went by and as I got clarity on what it was that I wanted more and more and more, I realized that I could be a coach within my specific business. And that didn't mean that I wanted to build a coaching business. And that's fine. And so I was out multiple $1,000s, but I at least started somewhere, right? I started doing something, and it was that momentum that ultimately led for me to start a real estate business. And so, again, don't let this idea of having the perfect thing to do be what prevents you from actually taking action. Just start and know that it's not going to be your forever thing. I think the second mindset thing I would give you is business is all just skill acquisition and taking massive action on that skill acquisition. And so for me, what does that mean? It means I truly believe that entrepreneurs are not born. I believe that the best entrepreneurs have focused on a very unique set of skills, and they have focused on the right set of skills so hard that they got good. And I think that if you can understand that business is just simply a set of skills, and so if we break it down, for example, sales and marketing are the top two. And if you have those two things, if you know how to sell something and then you know how to market it, ultimately you're going to get people to give you money for your stuff. Voila, you have a business, right? So if you break it down, if you break business down into those two skills, sales and marketing, well, then depending on your specific business that you want to start, you could say, hey, what's the one thing that I would get the most benefit of? Maybe my current career has taught me a little bit more about sales. And so maybe I'll focus on marketing because I need to make sure people know about my stuff, right? But understanding that business is simply skill acquisition, and you have to figure out how you can assess, okay, what are of the skills required to be good at business, what am I good at based on what my current career has taught me in terms of my current skill set, and then what is the one skill that if I focused on would maximize my probability of getting this business off the ground. And then that's all that you focus on. And so just realizing and understanding that the people who run multi-million, billion-dollar businesses, they're not these business unicorns. A lot of them were self-made and they started exactly where you are. And they just focused on the right skills to get them to where it is that they are now. And I think that's a good segue to the next little note I wrote down here, which is focus on improvement versus whether or not you achieved an outcome. And what I mean by that is, for example, when I was in real estate, I might set a goal that said, hey, I want to flip, 10 houses in my first year. Well, what I found is that then I would take specific actions that would specifically achieve flipping 10 houses in my first year. But that doesn't necessarily, I flipped 10, I bought more than 10 houses in my first year, but a lot of them I lost money on, right? So I achieved the specific outcome that I was after, but because I wasn't focused on improving first and I had some fictitious made up outcome in my mind, I was optimizing for the wrong thing. Whereas had I simply optimized for, hey, I want to be a better real estate investor today than I was yesterday, what are the things that I can focus on to just simply improve? Then maybe I'm okay only buying 5 flips my first year, and I really focus on getting my construction processes and build up my general contractor team and Maybe I learned some lessons that weren't as difficult to learn about advancing contractors' money. But the point is, when you optimize for a specific outcome, then you may realize in the long run that the outcome isn't what you're after anyways. And so if you can shift all of your attention to just focusing on improving the skill sets that you need to ultimately get better, and realize that the game you're playing, the purpose is to continue playing the game, not to win the game. And to comment on this for a second, Simon Sinek wrote a beautiful book, and the book was, I think he called it The Infinite Game or something like that. And basically the concept that Simon Sinek beautifully communicates is how playing the game of business is a game that you infinitely play. The point is to continue to play the game. For example, when you're married, you don't win at marriage. The point is to just stay married. And so if you can learn to play infinite games as opposed to try to play finite games where there's a clear winner and a clear loser, then the focus on improvement becomes that much easier, because you're not trying to win. You're not trying to avoid losing. You're simply trying to focus on being able to continue to play the game. And the last thing I have on mindset here, and this is the thing that I think helped me focus on that infinite game mindset as opposed to a fixed game mindset, is have your short-term goals be inputs as opposed to outputs. What do I mean by that? Well, again, I'm going to use the example of real estate. Let's say my goal, again, I have this goal that I want to flip 10 houses. Well, in order for me to do that, what are the things required for me to acquire 10 houses in 1 year? Well, it means I'm going to have to talk to a lot of realtors. I'm going to have to talk to a lot of wholesalers. And I'm not just going to have to talk to them. I'm going to have to build really deep relationships, figure out how I can add value to their businesses. I'm going to have to talk to a lot of contractors. I'm going to have to get a lot of bids so I get more familiar with construction. And so my inputs into that business system are the number of realtors that I'm talking to, the number of realtors that I build deep relationships with, the number of contractors I build deep relationships with, the number of offers I'm making per week, right? Those are all inputs into the system, and the outputs of that system is a successfully flipped house. But once I completely shift my mindset away from an output of a successfully flipped house, and I can focus all of my attention, 100% of my attention on the input, then it means that I'm focused on something that I can 100% control. And it also helps manage the roller coaster of emotions of, if you're focused on outputs and you achieve the output, then you give the output the power to give you a little high, right? But what that means, if the output, whether or not you've achieved an outcome, has the ability to give you a high, it means that if you haven't achieved it, it has the ability to give you a low. And if there's anything I've learned in business, it's being able to act despite your emotions and just taking action regardless is what actually achieves some sort of outcome in the future. So you have to have the ability to focus your attention completely and solely on what are the inputs into the system, and stop thinking about, am I achieving some specific outcome? So I hope that was helpful for you guys. Those are the exact 5 steps I did to start my journey of knowing that I wasn't born to be an employee and knowing that I wanted more of life. And I took those steps in that order to start to get clarity on what it is that I wanted. And then just taking action every single week is ultimately what led me to leave my job at the end of the day. And then now I'm blessed to be 5 years into this journey of entrepreneurship and have had my real estate business. I'm in my 5th year now. And it all stemmed from the beginning, getting clear on what it is that I want, and then just defining specific steps and specific actions along the way, and then taking them consistently every single week. And if you can do that, man, you blink and 5 years go by, and it might be pretty cool when you're 5 years in the future to look back and remember the moment that you're in now, and remember the exact moment where you made the decision that you were going to do something and that you were going to change the course of your life. So I hope that was helpful. If you know someone that you think would benefit from hearing this, shoot it over to them. One thing that seemed ever so common when I was a W-2 employee, it seemed like there were a lot of people who felt like they knew that they were meant for something more, but they chose safety over going after something that they truly wanted. And I have a mission that there are fewer and fewer people that actually choose safety, and that there are more and more people who choose pursuing something that really gives them purpose in their life. And so if you know someone out there who fits that, please share it with them. It's also selfishly how this podcast grows. But I appreciate you guys listening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.